This is like narrow hallway. It was very reverberant. We went out there at 7 or 8 in the morning when no one was around. And Howard put the condenser mic down at the bottom of the hallway and one close. And everyone was trying to crack the whip. I tried it and I cracked the whip and stabbed myself in the face.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock. This is the podcast for those about to read and rock. I'm Eric Senich. Before we get started, listeners and viewers can get 15% off classic rock merchandise at oldglory.com. So many great items there. The code is Booked on Rock. The link in the show notes or at bookedonrock.com under my deals. All right, our guest is Robert Margouleff. He is a Grammy Award-winning producer, engineer, filmmaker, and electronic music pioneer whose innovations helped to reshape modern popular music. Alongside partner Malcolm Cecil, the late great Malcolm Cecil, he co-created TONTO, one of the most advanced analog synthesizers ever built, and together they helped define Stevie Wonder's classic 1970s run, contributing to landmark albums including Music of My Mind, Talking Book, Innervisions, and Fulfillingness First Finale. Beyond Stevie, Margouleff has worked with artists including DEVO, Billy Preston, the Isley Brothers, and David Sanborn, while also pioneering immersive surround sound for major films like Lord of the Rings, Seven, and X-Men. He tells his remarkable story in his memoir, Shaping Sounds, Stevie Wonder, DEVO, The Synth Revolution, and My Life Behind the Music, due out May 19th. Robert, welcome to the podcast. How was that for an introduction?
Boy, you really wound up there, I'll tell you. I loved it.
I could have kept going. I had to edit it down.
If you'd let me know in advance, I would have brought my violin.
This is so great to be able to talk to you and ask you questions about all of the amazing projects you worked on and the things you did with, and I said the late great Malcolm Cecil, who unfortunately just recently passed away, right?
About a year and a half ago, yeah. His wife just passed on too. So they're back, they're together again. They're stardust.
Yeah.
Malcolm had a good run. He was 87.
We'll talk about what the two of you did together, but let's start going back to your childhood. In the book, you write extensively about your upbringing in post-war New York and feeling somewhat emotionally isolated despite being in a stable middle-class home. You also write that music created decisive emotional moments for you. Can you talk about the importance of music in your life early on?
Well, I don't know. I think that we have, what do they call it? Epigenetic memory. There's a lot of music in my family that goes back on both sides. My older sister, who's, God bless her, she's 94 now, but masters in keyboard from Juilliard. Duo pianist Lubavitch and Nemenov, long gone from the Planet RCA duo pianists. Music's always been in my family on both sides. Just recently, I got in contact with my father's side of the family, and based in France, that part of my family. And Delacour is also in music, a recording engineer. It seems that we have an epigenetic memory of our past. It's like a little book or a little Kodachrome movie running in our genes in some way. And music has always been in my family. I can remember as a little boy, like 3, 4 years old, we had this beautiful sunroom off the living room of my family's home in Great Neck. And we had a big Steinway piano in there, a grand piano. And my sister used to play Bach, Brahms, and Beethoven. She was going to Juilliard. And I would be playing with my little Tinky toys under the piano and listening to Bach, Brahms, and Beethoven. And I'm still doing it. I mean, although I've had a good run in pop and R&B, my roots really are classical music, mostly piano music. For that reason, I think I was brainwashed under the piano. Maybe the piano fell on me. I don't know.
Maybe.
Turned me into a waffle. But I've always lived with music in my life, and I couldn't deny it. I mean, I tried to go into the motion picture business later on, and to be a filmmaker and a photographer and stuff. But somehow, no matter what I did, I've always had a predisposition to move toward music, and I grew up like that. I mean, I love classical music. I listen to it all the time. Now at 85 years old, um, I listen to more classical music than I listen to pop records.
Well, okay. Well, you grew up around the same time as my mom and dad, and my dad introduced me to so many of the great artists, Glenn Miller and all those, Artie Shaw, and I always say, if you love music, you will find a connection. It's all there, from classical to.
It's amazing to think about Bing Crosby and Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman and what a band looked like, and how the microphone changed reality during that time. Before then, it was like, oh, the band would play, and you had to go to a really good, acoustically correct uh, concert hall to really hear well, or to hear great opera. There were some rooms that were better for certain kind of music, and other rooms for other kinds of music. And uh, then the microphone happened, and suddenly there was electronics and electricity inside the concert hall, and Bing Crosby could get right on the mic, right where you are on your mic right now, and he could do ba ba boo, and the girls would love it because his voice was as loud as the entire band behind him, because we were rearranging reality with electricity. And once the microphone happened, we began to really rearrange the musical world in a very different way. Not particularly in classical music, was really a little bit more sound reinforcement. But do you think even the levels of loudness, a band like Glenn Miller, how loud do you think Glenn Miller's band got when it was blowing their brains out? I would say maybe about 80 dB SPL, sound pressure level. When we were in the studio with the Stones or with Poison or Guns N' Roses, where do you think the levels were? I will tell you, about 126 dB SPL, twice the level of the loudest the dance band would make. And we had to learn how to handle that kind of level in a control room and get something that's predictable coming out the other end of it. You know, the control room was more than a place for the engineers with the pencil protectors to and the short sleeve white shirts to monkey around with the electronics. We had to deliver sonically correct, equal in frequency music to a standard at pretty high levels. And it's a whole different world now where music falls out of just vibrating electrons, like with Tonto. There is no acoustical instrument. It falls the first time you hear a sound, it's coming out of a loudspeaker. The room itself is a musical instrument.
When did you first start to listen to music and start thinking about those things, like how it was all put together and things that maybe the normal person wouldn't think of?
Well, I really had like a rude awakening when I started working with Stevie and Malcolm. And the reason it was during the time that we started developing a thing in the business calling quadraphonic sound. And it had a lifespan, a short lifespan, basically. But the concept was that we would be able to create an immersive space with 4 loudspeakers, and that we could put it on vinyl. And that was a big deal. Mostly Sansui developed a system called QS. And when we moved out from New York, from Electric Lady with Stevie, Malcolm and me, and Steve went west, we were invited to go to the record plant. The record plant was always about the latest and the greatest. And we'd heard a lot about quad. They said they offered to build a control room for us, and they wanted to do the latest thing, quad, to do it. And basically, it would involve mixing music in 4 channels instead of 2, and creating a space where instead of having an objective view of music, like here's the proscenium march, and here's Benny Goodman playing with his clarinet and everything, and you see a picture of the band, or you see a picture of a rock and roll band in front of you inside a proscenium arch. And versus that where the sound was objective, or the concert classical music with a symphony orchestra with the conductor in the middle and the orchestra spread out, and you would get the ambient sound behind you. So it was around that time that DECO in London was fooling around a lot with it. RCA, mostly English, were doing it, but we were on the top of it. We said, well, since we're building a new control room to have Steve and stuff in there, and to have a space for TONTO, the original neo-timbral orchestra, that we would build a quad control room. And we tried mixing some of Steve's stuff in quad, and it sounded terrific when it was on tape, 4-channel discrete channels. But it really, in the long run, turned into a miserable failure, an expensive miserable failure, because it really didn't hold up on vinyl. But the reason I tell the story is because where it really held up was it enabled us to start to monitor music while we were recording it as a production tool, to monitor it in quad and bring, for example, Stevie or DEVO or any number of artists that I was working with, or that Malcolm and I were working with, the ability to bring them into the control room and have the background vocals behind them, and the rhythm guitar on one side and the clavinet on the other side, and the lead vocal in the front, and the drums panning around and filling the space. Because what it did, it enabled us to turn the music from an objective proscenium space to a subjective immersive space. So it became a fantastic tool for working and creating music, versus we weren't able to. We tried doing the vinyl. It was a miserable failure, and people didn't want to buy a special cartridge for the turntable for the quadraphonic, nor did they want to have a separate amplifier. And your wife would kill you if you want to put a subwoofer under the piano or
Oh, yeah.
in the fireplace, So it didn't work. It was a little early. Now, of course, we have Dolby Atmos and a whole bunch of other things where placement of music inside of a source, point source for music. Dolby is, you can create a point where the sound exactly is, But that's wonderful for motion pictures and stuff. But for music, I think it's a little excessive. I don't think it's going to really meet with a lot of huge success. It's very expensive to really reproduce it the right way. But there are pluses and minuses about Dolby Atmos. It certainly sounds terrific when it's done correctly. But it became a tool for me over the years to be able to bring people into the control room, because then you would get all the crosstalk. You would get the way people normally hear things. You hear, if you we're doing this now with the headphone stuff, and what's coming in on the right side, you hear only on the right side. What's coming in on the left side, you're hearing only on the left side. But if you're in a room and there are big speakers there in the front and around you, you're hearing stuff that's coming out of the left speaker on the left side, but you're also hearing the crosstalk of it delayed slightly on the right side, and vice versa. And by virtue of what's going on, there's very complicated organs in our brain called the tools, the inside part of our ears. All of that information is enabling us to decide where the sound is coming from, what the character of it is, how it's moving, and it's much more immediate, and it doesn't leave you with a with a deficit in your hearing, because we're used to hearing things with a carrier, with sound behind it. And when you remove that and you just put stuff on headphones only, your cognitive thinking is different. That's what I discovered. And the cognition is really what makes great music. What really made Stevie fly, what made Devo fly, and a lot of people I've worked with over the years, is working in the control room with the speakers up in quad so that people could really immerse themselves and feel a part of it without having this kind of uh, sensory deprivation by virtue of having the sound isolated and removed from the environment. What makes a great, what makes a great live concert is the fact that there is crosstalk, that there is people, that there is sound underneath, that it gives us the ability to decode what's noise and what's real, what's important. So I think in a lot of ways, noise cancellation and earphones is something that's really beginning to affect people's education and the ability to pay attention to things. I think that we're going to see in test scores, if something's done, you will hear that this noise canceling stuff could be detrimental to learning and to cognition. Uh, so, but I didn't know about that. All I knew is that when I brought musicians into the control room, it was a different story. The glass went away. It was the only people that really used, I like to use in the studio for pop music was the drummer or an acoustic instrument where I needed to have the isolation so that I could mix it later on. But if I could have the musician in the control room where there's liveness and fullness and subjectivity in the music, I always got a better performance. And I think that's part of the reason that those records sound like that.
Yeah. And again, just hearing you talk with such passion about that, it sounds like you could probably live in a studio and you'd be just fine. You probably
I'm 85 years old. I don't know what this camera's doing, but it makes me look really young.
You
I'm
look
flattering
wonderful.
myself like crazy. But
But you do have such a sincere passion for this, which you could just see it. It comes through when you're saying it. And you obviously we can hear it with the final results, with the Stevie Wonder music and all the great stuff that you did. It's just a beautiful thing.
well, it's what's kept me alive all these years. My life's been a circus. I've done so many different things uh, but it all really boils down to how do we know where sound comes from? How does our brain decide that? And we don't even think about it. It's what's going on in our heads. I mean, if you think about if a sound coming behind you, your reptilian brain considers that might be a threat. That's an uh-oh, right?
You're right.
There's a lot going on upstairs that we just assume it's just operating. The wheels are turning, and we're not listening to the sound of our wheels. We're responding to what the stimuli bring us. And if we interfere with that the wrong way, or we don't really understand the truths of the physiology of how we listen and what it does, it would leaves us at a disadvantage. I think you get the best music if people really connect to the medium. A lot of modern instruments now aren't acoustical at all. They don't have anything to do with acoustics. They're electronic, like a synthesizer, or as I call it, a sympathizer. And you play it, and it happens in space, and it's not a sound till it falls out of the loudspeaker. So it makes the control room an instrument that you inhabit.
You described the Moog synthesizer as love at first sound. Take us back to the exact moment you first heard a Moog synthesizer.
Ah, yes, the Moog sympathizer. Well, I'll tell you, I was living in the East Village. It was pot smoke and peyote and flower power and hippies, and I was crossing the boundary between being a beatnik and a hippie. There was a little sort of fuzzy, you might say, fuzzy line between the two. Pretty fuzzy for sure. And I lived around the corner from the Jefferson from uh, the Fillmore East. And I remember the first concert, Jefferson Airplane. But I was existing in East Village. I was in the process of producing a feature film, my first epic foray into filmmaking, because I'd come out of the service with training as a combat photographer, and I fancied myself a first-class filmmaker. I love photography. And I made a film, produced a film, only the first half of it, actually, a film called Chow Manhattan. And it featured all the denizens and creeps from, not creeps, yeah, maybe creeps. I was a creep too, a creep with a crepe. Anyway, from Andy's factory, from Andy Warhol's factory, uh, I hooked up with a beautiful starlet named Edie Sedgwick, and we were busy making a film. And I wanted to
Andy
do
Warhol superstar.
Yeah, Andy Warhol superstar. Well, he was Baby Jane Holzer superstar, then Edie Sedgwick superstar. Andy had a whole string of superstars, and at that time, Edie was being the superstar. She'd come from Radcliffe, the guy named Chuck Wine, who was the seer of the mystic order of Andy Warhol and the factory. But they were getting tired over there and they weren't getting paid. And Andy was doing stuff with 16 millimeter news gathering cameras, which at that time were probably more advanced than anything, but were very limited. And I came up with the idea of creating the first above ground underground movie. And I wanted to bring what was going on in that sort of psychedelic time, that sort of New York scene, which was very dramatic and very druggy, I might add. The Max's Kansas City, the art openings, Andy Warhol's paintings and Campbell soup cans and stuff, and this whole clutch of beautiful models and druggy guys hanging around, and what was going on, Joe D'Alessandro and Paul America and Edie and Baby Jane Holzer, and a whole scene, a milieu of people at the factory and stuff. And I thought that would make, I just come back. I was really sort of a puppy. I was like 28 years old or something. And I thought that I could make the first above ground movie, above ground underground movie. Andy's movies were called underground movies, like Empire, 16 hours long, stuff like that. It was pretty experimental stuff. And I respected and I was interested in what was going on. And it came to pass that I sort of gave the filmmaking equipment to the stars and to the actors themselves, because I wanted to see if we could self-make a movie instead of like getting a whole bunch of establishment guys with the pencil protectors and white coats and stuff, and people in the union, to making movies. We wanted to do something on our own. And I thought I could bring the underground culture to a wider audience. It really was the impetus for that. But what happened was I was in the East Village, and just a long story off a short pier, you might say. But I was at a nightclub, and I went to a nightclub. It was a place called Cerebrum. And they had a couple of modules from a destroyed Moog synthesizer there, and they were playing electronica music in the club in between the dance acts, in between the dance music. And I heard the synthesizer, and I said, man, I really like what that thing is doing. And it dawned on me that I could use the synthesizer to make the score for Chow Manhattan. And the very next week, I called Bob Moog, and we made friends. And I bought a Moog 3C. And it was one of the first he made, one of the first two or three. Wendy Carlos had one. Peter Nero had one. I had one, and I was going to use it to score Chow Manhattan, which we started doing. Unfortunately, we never finished the film. And so there are fragments of it, but I've just finished the book. You can the book, and and shaping sounds, but it's also an audio book, and there are fragments of the original Moog soundtrack from Chow Manhattan in the audio version.
It wasn't user friendly at first. I think you read about that.
No,
Right?
it was very basically unfriendly.
Right.
Uh, it was very dicey. It was very temperature sensitive, and if you got a sound, you better take it while you got it because it wouldn't be there in a few hours. And Bob Moog came down a couple times because the keyboards were drifting and stuff, and he'd come down with a soldering gun and a handful of transistors and sit on the floor in my studio and solder transistors into the keyboards and stuff. But it was a wonderful experience for me. I really loved it. As a matter of fact, the way it turned out is I left the movie behind me and walked with my arms wide into the arms of electronica and ended up with the synthesizer. And of course, the rest is history. I mean, it's a well-known adventure, you know. But I left the movie behind. We got finished with under someone else's auspices. Basically, I helped them and everything, but I ran out of money and everything else. I ran through over $100,000 and couldn't get it finished. Mainly, there was a lot of issues with Dr. Roberts, as we called him in the movie, and his famous vitamin shots. The real Dr. Roberts was busy poking up Kennedy in Washington.
Right.
Went to Vienna with Khrushchev, where Kennedy met Khrushchev, and he was giving shots to Kennedy for his back issues.
Right.
Yeah.
What a story,
The rocket
man.
chair and all that stuff.
Wow.
But he was poking up the whole cast of Hair and the whole cast of Chow Manhattan. So it really sort of turned into a lot of chaos down there toward the end of it. And then it was reconstituted later in LA with David Weissman, who we called Rocca, who is a very determined and driven guy, very talented. And he shot the color footage part of it, which I'm not really overly in love with, but the black and white footage was really what Chow Manhattan was. But it introduced me to the synthesizer.
Yeah, look what it led to.
Yeah, and what it led to is because I hear that stuff in my head, and my musical epigenetics, my unvoiced memories of my ancestors were banging around in my head somewhere, and my genome has driven me toward music, and it wasn't a choice after a while. I mean, here I am, 85 years old. I just made a record last year, but right now we're in some big changes with AI, which I'm really loving. I think.
I was wondering what you thought about AI.
Yeah, I think you cannot deny it, and it's here. It's not going away. I don't care if the WGA says you can't use something in our book if it's written with AI. You can't use it. Union rules. You have to keep the writers writing and blah blah blah. I think that in the end, the whole bottom line is this, and this is what I've learned, the big learn for the last 60 years. Technology drives the art. It's that simple, okay? If the technology is there, art is going to change and adapt to it. Just think of the one microphone and Bing Crosby being able to do ba ba ba, and the microphone with the microphone like this, like you are with your RE20, right? And all the girls are hearing Bing sing right to them, right? Confessional, right? And he's as loud as the entire orchestra, and he's just ba-ba-booing, and he's as loud as the whole of 30 musicians. When you start to be able to rearrange reality like that with electronica, you begin to change the nature of music. And look where it's gone.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I use AI to help with the podcast for various things, using the creative thoughts that I have, and then AI will help.
Yeah, it's all there. It's all to be used. I do not fear the future. Embrace the future and live with it and understand it. It's not a dirty word. but we're going to learn how to use it. We're going to step on our own weenies a couple of times going down the process of learning it, but it is there for us to use. And if art is involved, artists will find a way of using it in an artistic way for storytelling and for research and for a million other things. It has its good points and its bad points, like everything else.
Like everything else. Yeah.
But this is it, It's just another instrument. It's like a guitar. It depends on who's playing it.
Yeah, I think people will get caught up too much in, yes, of course you can go too far. There's literally music that's being created and we're being sold it as it's being created by human beings, and it's not. And we're hearing this on Spotify and places like that. And also with books. I mean, I've heard a story about somebody having a publisher pull a book because it's being accused of the entire book is just created by AI. Well, that's going too far, of course. That's the extreme.
Well,
that's not using it as a tool. That's just.
I've run into that with my own book. They informed me that I didn't use AI. I used a little bit here and there for research, but they said we are under contract to the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, and we're signatories to their deal, and we're forbidden from using AI.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a huge mistake. I think that we have to learn to embrace the technology. You can't walk around with your head buried in the sand because you want to keep, umpteen people working or doing stuff. People are going to use the tools at hand in some kind of creative way. It's just another instrument like a guitar or anything else. It's well educated, but it's always looking backwards. Think about trying to get something like AI to play, like Suno to play, some freeform jazz. I think you find it would be very, very below average results from that. I think it has its place like anything else. Artists are here to embrace change. That's what separates the wheat from the chaff.
For the listeners and viewers who may not know, what exactly was TONTO and why was it revolutionary for its time?
Well, right now, you would say TONTO could be emulated with the Euro rack. What TONTO was first of all, we had, Malcolm and I had, modules and racks and stuff all over the place. It was getting to a place where the thing was like 14 feet long. How do you go from one end of the instrument to another? You needed a belly board or something to scoot from one side to the other. We needed a way to actually, what we wanted to do was TONTO stands for the Original Neo-Timbral Orchestra. What we were looking to do with an analog world, because there's no digital anything when we were doing this stuff, was to have an instrument that was playable for real-time performance. And John Stork, who was the designer of Electric Ladyland, that was his first Electric Lady, not Electric Lady. Electric Ladyland was Jimmy's record. Electric Lady was the studio. And John Stork built Electric Lady, the most friendly, first, really, Jimi Hendrix's first studio was the first home studio. Electric Lady was a home studio. Jimmy built it for his own work. And when he passed, Stevie and me and Malcolm went down there and we found a new home. We were able to put our feet in his shoes. But John, we tried to conceive of a way of making that shell, that round shell, so when we turned away from each other, we could do all our programming, right? But then we could turn toward each other and play the keyboards facing each other. So it was a way of, with the large, because it was all analog, it was highly unstable. But Malcolm figured out bussing and doing some technology we were able to make and execute where we could play simultaneous 3, 4, 5, and 6 voices at one time, each voice on its own controller, not polyphonic this way with 4 notes. Like when Steve first came in, we first met Steve on that weekend, Memorial Day weekend, 1972. And we brought him into the studio. It was a Sunday and it was very quiet. And we brought Steve into Studio B at Media, and he put his hands over it. We guided him around. We kind of explained what it was and what it could do. And he'd already heard our record, our electronica record, Zero Time, and he knew had some expectation. And we cranked it up, and he was there, and he said, Malcolm, there's something wrong with the synthesizer. Malcolm says, what's the problem? He says, well, I'm trying to play chords, and all I'm getting is one note. And Malcolm really was very succinct. He said, Steve, it only plays one note at a time. It's like a saxophone or a trumpet or, a wind instrument. You put your whole soul into your embouchure and here, and that one note comes out, but it's filled with intent and attitude and energy and the blues, that you can bend notes and do things that, but it's only one note at a time. And the synthesizer is like that. We could play 3 and 4 notes because we had 3 and 4 keyboards where we could do 2 voices here and 2 voices over there and do stuff together. And some of that stuff that we do with Stevie, you see, it's very, like Music of My Mind, very small record in the sense of the number of instruments. There's no big waterfalls on those records. It's all intimate like a string quartet. Very close, very intimate, RE20 microphone on the voice. Very close, just like you're doing right now.
Before we started recording, Robert noticed the microphone right away. He says, I like that microphone. RE20.
I got one on my desk right
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
I love it. I was telling you, I worked at radio for so many years. So if I was going to do a podcast, I wanted to get the right kind of mic.
You did the right thing. The other thing that was really good about that microphone, especially with Steve being unsighted, he was able to touch the microphone on the side without creating any sound, so he could know where the microphone was.
Oh,
because he
yes.
couldn't see it, right?
Right.
But you put your hand on the side of that microphone now, it won't make any noise.
Huh? Yeah.
You can if you just lightly turn it, you won't get any mic noise from it because it's so rejective. You're really working at what, 3 or 4 inches from the microphone, right?
You also said you were there when Wicked Lester was recording. So for Kiss fans, I want to get that out there too. You threw that little nugget out there. You said you were there when Paul and Gene were recording under the Wicked Lester name before Kiss.
Yeah, Bill Aucoin was managing him.
Wow.
That was a scene too, I'll tell you. But look at the huge success those guys had.
They did okay. Yeah, I had Hernan Rojas, I believe his name. And so he was one of the engineers on Fleetwood Mac's Rumors, and I think also the next album. And he was there at the time when, in the early days, I don't know if that name sounds familiar, but those early days of Electric Lady, I'm sure you have stories to tell.
The stories are endless. Shaping sounds. I was shaping sounds for a long time. But I was also shaping myself in the jacuzzi next door to my studio.
Nice.
Yeah. Beer was 25 cents in the soda machine, and the Coke machine was all beer. Heineken and stuff, you get 25 cents. And pinball and guys running around in their record company executives running around in their leather jackets, everyone huffing and puffing and hang and everything, people running around from one studio to another. It was the most wonderful, marvelous, totally psychedelic, but very high technology at the same time. It was the biggest playpen in the world. And the Hotel California, written by the Eagles, where'd they write it? The record plant. That's where the name Hotel California came from. See, it was a scene and a half. You have no idea. I can't even begin to explain it.
Well, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? That was the.
It was indeed. It was indeed.
When did you meet Stevie Wonder? How did that? You write about that in a book too. It's a great story. I think he went to your place and said, "Hey, I've heard about you. I want you on my next record," because he was ready to make the move to a different stage of his career, right?
Well, his contract, finally, his pre-majority contract that we signed to Motown as a child And he had already had like 12 or 13 albums, which were made under the strict auspices of Berry Gordy and the style school that Motown maintained to get acceptance for black artists in front of wide audiences. And it was called the Style School. And it was a very, it was a routine. Four guys all dressed in the same suits doing synchronized dancing behind a gal or a guy standing in the front. The same band, the same rhythm section for every group. It was a formula. But the bands during that time, black music was called race music back in the early in the 60s. And somebody at Atlantic, I'll think of his name in a second. Anyway, he came up with the concept of calling race music rhythm and blues. And that changed everything. It made it possible for the big labels to start looking at, because most of the black music was coming out on little independent labels managed by various managers and entrepreneurs who had little junior labels of all kinds. And the big boys were not doing it, and they needed the vinyl and all that stuff for the military and stuff. And there was a lot of racism in music at that time. And I think that both the Jewish people in the business and the black people in the business both had their disasters. The Jews had the Holocaust. The black people had slavery and in their past. And I think somehow they kind of unconsciously kind of identified with each other. And also the Jewish music of Eastern Europe was melismatic, just like the black music was melismatic. There was a lot of sort of common energy going on, and it was this sort of rumbling underground. And Berry Gordy came through, and a few other black artists came through with the first true black labels that really sort of, except you say, we can do this too. We don't have to be under the thumbs of the white record companies. There was that kind of energy going on too during that time. And there was also the Brill Building, where all the publishers were hanging out, and they would do their songs, Tin Pan Alley stuff, and the song pluggers would be running around with their briefcase and the piano players and stuff. And there was a real kind of melding of a lot of white soul singers, white songwriters, and black songwriters working together. It was a kind of just in the very late 60s, early 70s, there was a lot of cooperation beginning to happen there. It was kind of really an interesting time. And but we out of that came a whole bunch of stuff. And Steve came out of that time, but he came out of it with a very socially aware time, and it was something that was very important to me as well. I think possibly the most important song that I committed to tape was our recordings of Living for the City.
Yes,
with Stevie.
I wanted to ask you about that. By the way, was that Jerry Wexler?
Yes, I knew him. He was a good man.
Yeah.
But these were record guys. These were the real deal. The Crooks had the jukeboxes. It was Las Vegas was really a den of iniquity. It wasn't sort of sanitized thing with lots of fountains and overpriced everything. And it was a bunch of gangsters running that and running the thing. It was a whole other kind of life and a whole other kind of existence. And it was goodness and badness like everything else, but music really flowered from that. And a lot of people got taken advantage of too. This wasn't, there were a lot of people running around getting ripped off for their publishing and all kinds of things like that.
Sure.
But at the end of it, the music was absolutely spectacular and simple. And I'm just glad I was there for it, But it was an interesting time. I call it Blues and the Jews. It's really a time when two sort of downtrodden social world got together and made something happen together. And not totally voluntarily, but that's just the way it happened. But it was amazing. It was an amazing time and filled with wonderful, wonderful music. And I'm just glad I was there to capture it and to be a part of it.
Robert Margouleff, his memoir, Shaping Sounds, Stevie Wonder, DEVO, The Synth Revolution, and My Life Behind the Music. So walk us through how songs like Living for the City and Superstition come together from a production standpoint.
Living for the City, I called Steve on the phone. Not that he's been really available to me. He hasn't really been very much available because he's a busy person himself. I love him to death, by the way. Steve is a remarkable person. But I called him on the phone and I asked him, I said, Steve, what do you remember about when we were cutting Living for the City? It was one of the first things we recorded. And he said, it was raining. I mean, who remembers that from 50 years ago?
Yeah.
Right? But it was at a time when the kids from the South, the black kids from the South, were beginning to try to figure out, to find a way to make a living. And some of them were coming to New York, and others were going to Detroit to work in the car factories. And it was the time of civil rights. It was the time of Norman Pettus Bridge and the Civil Rights Act in 58 or 59. Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, and there was equality, and there were U.S. Marshals, bringing little girls to school, black girls to school in the South with guns. And there was a lot of roiling around. And a few years later with DEVO, for example, it was Kent State, where the National Guard killed a whole bunch of students on campus. And Jerry and Gerald and Mark were there as art students when that happened. They too were very politically oriented. The other one artist from Motown who really sort of was doing it was a guy named Marvin Gaye. It was also during that time, was sort of instrumental in making music that was political, more political. And Steve really wanted to be a political person, and he was 21 years old. He was filled with idealism and talent. The top of his head was exploding, basically, and he finally got out from underneath his contract, which expired on his 21st birthday, and he didn't want to do the Motown formula where the band would come in through the kitchen and the clients and the audience would come in through the front door, and play this formulaic kind of Motown sort of music hall kind of stuff. With the same core band and the same discipline and sort of told how to behave in front of a wide audience. And it was kind of very, uptight in a certain way, but it got the music in front of a wide audience, which was critical for selling records. I mean, what really changed for Steve, for example, was going out with the Stones. That was really brought his music in front of a huge wide audience. But it was a time when he wanted to be his own person, his own individual person. And Malcolm and I aided and abetted him. He always calls us his associate producers, which is fine. He can call me whatever he wants. But I think that those 4 records really speak for themselves. And whatever we were, whatever we did together, the formulaic thing behind it was magical. I can't explain it. I don't know. I can't understand. Even for me to listen to the sound of my own wheels is, I'm still sort of puzzled by it all in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Like capturing lightning in a bottle, but it lasted for a good few years there.
Well, that's the purpose of music, is to tell our stories. I mean, the music of like the Baroque music or music of Bach, Brahms, and Beethoven told the stories of their time. Our time is different because of we have electricity. They didn't have that. So, we were able to do something else. And now we're getting ready to do something else again. And that something else is going to be and is now changing the way we think and the way we create music. My real concern with, well, I guess it's going to just have to shake itself out. But, Suno could be making music with a vending machine. You know what I'm saying? It's like making music with a vending machine. Just you tell it and it spits out the song. On one hand, on the other hand, maybe there's a way of using that's more creative, that there's a way of integrating the imperfection of live performance, which is absolutely essential. If you go to a Taylor Swift concert, what makes this thing so compelling? It's the crosstalk. It's the left going into the right going into the left, people standing there. And you know that she's not going to sing it the same twice. No matter where she goes, it's going to be different every time. But it's that imperfection in the music that makes it so beautiful. It's what makes the analog synthesizers so much more beautiful than the digital ones, because they're imperfect. And when we see something that is not perfect, we notice it first. I remember like sitting in the parking lot in a late August afternoon, hot. It was like 110 degrees. And I was sitting in my car in this parking lot waiting to go into a rehearsal studio. And there was this big wall of green plants in front of my windshield, about, 30 feet or 40 feet away. And after a while, you look at it and it becomes invisible until a bird flew across the thing. And all of a sudden, I'm watching the bird, you know. That bird is sort of like the end of the baton of a conductor in an orchestra. It's also the bird is also the imperfection, the irregularity of something in a regular space. That irregularity is what draws our attention. And that's what a great vocal does. It's that thing that's different every single time. And that randomness is what makes the music beautiful. If you want to think about the click track, if you think about a Stevie song like Superstition, you time the first 8 bars of that song, or you time the first 8 bars of Whip It, right? Then you go down and you go to the third verse and you take the time and time the 8 bars of that. You'll see that the times are totally different because there's a thing called rubato where music speeds up and slows down. And in live performances, that's what makes it wonderful, whether it's a Brahms symphony or Scarlatti keyboard thing, or it's Kiss, or it's Stevie, or it's Billy Preston, or it's DEVO. What makes the songs wonderful is the beautiful imperfection of it, that it's different every time. And that's what we live for. And that's what's missing in a lot of our pop music is click track.
The Booked on Rock podcast is part of the Boneless Podcasting Network. If you're a fan of classic rock and classic film like I am, go to boneless.lovable.app to find over 20 great shows there. That's boneless.lovable.app, or just go to bookedonrock.com, the Boneless Podcasting Network. It is what you want it to be. Listen with confidence. There are artists now who are being criticized because people are saying that they are lip syncing to a track. Is there too much pressure because of the YouTube videos where everybody's seeing it and criticizing it, and most people have negative comments? Are they pressured into now thinking I have to sound perfect?
A lot of these songs that are done to pre-recorded tracks, you got to understand that they're driving, $500,000 worth of stage props, lighting and cues and things, and they have to make sure that the whole thing happens with a degree of synchronicity, and that's why they do it. It's also some people don't want to travel with 35 or 40 people that can't afford it. There are degrees for it, but there's no substitute. I understand it when you have a show that has a crew of 35 people and 4 big vans full of truck trailers full of stage gear and lighting and sound and cues and recording consoles and orchestras, sound effects off stage and dancers and everything else, that there has to be a degree of predictability. But that's a different kind of music than if it's, just a single voice singing out there, just with the piano, like a Joni Mitchell, for example, who I worship, The Ground She Walks On, okay? But where there's that kind of intimacy, where the music has vibrato, it speeds up, it slows down. What does an orchestra conductor do in front of a symphony orchestra with a stick? He comes out, he looks like a damn penguin with the tails on and all that stuff, and he stands up and he puts his back to the audience. But you know something? When you look from the other side and you see the conductor working, and you realize that there are 80 people on that stage following the end of his stick, of his baton, right? Or you look at someone like this. I had the privilege as a music student. I sang in the winters with a group called the Schola Cantorum. I was a chorister singing the choir. I used to sing in the choir of the New York Philharmonic. And I got a chance to really sing under the baton of Leonard Bernstein, among others. And he could conduct that orchestra with his face, just by his facial instructions, facial gestures. The orchestra was so in tune to him. But you really understand that what is the conductor doing? He's speeding it up, he's slowing it down, he's making it quieter, he's making it louder, but everybody's playing. And if he does the same Mahler symphony 2 weeks later, it's going to be different. And the same thing is true of great art. It's never the same twice. And what we look for, as you and I do, we look for those differences, that intimacy, that closeness. That's what really makes great performances. It's not the militancy.
With Stevie, do those songs come together quickly? You are looking for that element, that special human element there. Did it come together quickly, organically?
The thing is this, we never went in there with the idea, oh, we're going to do music of my mind. We got to get 12 songs for this album or that album or whatever. Steve and me and Malcolm, we just started recording. We just started the tape rolling, right? And we do, I don't know, 5 or 6 songs. We put them in the library and an archive, basically. Then we do a whole bunch more songs, and maybe the 20 songs. Then we go back and we pick ones up and say, let's put background vocals on this one, or what do you want to do with this one, Steve? You want to add a new bass line? What do you have in mind? He would walk into the time of Superstition. He walked into the studio. We didn't know Superstition, this or that. It wasn't Jeff Beck time or any of that. It was before. He'd just come in off the road from the Stones tour. And he said, walked into the studio and said, let's record the drums. Oh, what's the song, Stevie? Well, you'll hear it. He walked in the studio, and 20 minutes later, he walked out of the studio and played the drum track for Superstition with no other music. Okay. It was all upstairs. It was all up here. Right. And he played the drum track, and then we went back, and then suddenly Superstition emerged because we started putting clavinet tracks on it. But if you listen to those clavinet tracks, we used a lot of tape delay to get them to repeat. You'll hear where they collide, where they're not perfect, because the thing is moving. Okay, but that movement is what created the funk, you see. And you 8 bars of that, you do it, and you'll see those tracks are in motion, but it's that motion that creates the funk.
Wow. So yeah, I think that story was he just sat behind the drum kit. Like nobody knew he was going to do that.
It was all up here.
Yeah.
He has a remarkable mind. I mean, maybe it's because he's unsighted, but he has a memory like it's a steel trap up there. Like I said, when we were doing Live of the City, first thing out of his mouth is, it was raining. It says it all to me.
And essentially he's writing songs in his head.
Yeah, he is a remarkable, magical person. And God came down and put his thumb on his forehead. That's all I can tell you. There's no answer. There's no logical reason or anything else. It's just that's the way he was born. And he is an incredible human being. He's not perfect. None of us are perfect in every way. You know, he has his own issues, just like everybody else. But the thing is, he did change the culture, and we helped him do that. But we were, in many ways, we were creative and everything, but we were his handmaidens, basically. He was the one who came up with the songs. We didn't come up with the songs. We came up with the orchestrations and the sounds and engineering and storing the information, encouraging him, and whatever we did to blow on the coals and everything else. But the bottom line is Stevie and his God.
Yeah, and he was at that. It seemed like you were both at that period where you converged at just the right time, where you had all these creative thoughts
there was
ready to explode.
There was a 3-year period of an incredible bright flash of light when me and Steve and Malcolm all sort of got together for that moment in time. Have I ever been to Steve's house for dinner? No. Have I ever gone to the movies with Steve, or other than going to hear him sing at one of his toy things, concerts, sit in the audience? That's the only time. Have I ever been to his house in 50 years or 60 years that I've known him? No. Because the place we lived together was the studio. That's where we lived. And that's where we worked and where we created that magic.
Thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes, on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. With Stevie, there was a fracture there, and then you guys, everything's cool now, right? There was something that happened. And that's the business side of music, right? It was a publishing thing, or
It's not the first time. It's not the last time. When business issues come into the studio, that's when things go south. That's what happened with us. If we had a little different understanding of it, a little bit different of this, or Stevie's lawyer had a different attitude toward us or whatever, things might have been different. But they weren't. It's what it was. When business came into the studio, that's when we went our separate ways. Malcolm stood up from the thing. He turned around to the people at the back of the studio. He said, "Would you mind being quiet, because we're trying to communicate with Stevie?" And it was a time when Stevie was on edge. He turned to her and he said, "Malcolm, don't you speak to my friends like that." And that was the time Malcolm stood up and walked out of the studio. And that's when the Angels left the building. I tried to put it back together again. I've always had a civil relationship with Steve. I love him to death, and Malcolm too. It really hurt us.
he was under pressure, wasn't he, though, from the label? They wanted everybody to think that he was the only guy that created this.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
he was under that pressure. So you saw him on TV and he didn't thank you. And
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of things, a lot of slights and stuff that we felt and everything.
an award
I
show.
kind of let a lot of that stuff slide. But in the end, nothing's forever. And I'm just glad we lasted for the 3.5 years we lasted together. I have a really decent friendship with Steve now. It's fine. We love each other. If he called me and asked me to do something a year or two ago, I went down and played a synthesizer for the first time in 20 years on one of his tracks, created some bass sounds. Not that they were terrific bass sounds or anything, because I was really kind of rusty. But, I care about him.
Yeah.
I love him. I care about him. And I know what we did together, that the good certainly outweighs the bad in every way.
He's now publicly acknowledged your contributions now.
Yeah, numerous times. I have nothing but admiration and love for him. And I care about where he's going and his health issues too, just like everyone else. He's 10 years younger than I am. I'm 85, he's 75. But I was 10 years ahead of him in civil rights. So when Steve came on the scene with Living for the City, I had already been there once with what was going on when in 1958 when I was in high school. So, what comes around goes around. He's a remarkable human being. He's as imperfect as everyone else on the planet.
Sure.
He's what is known as a human being. And it doesn't mean color or any race or any of that stuff. What's inside of him doesn't have a color. It's just a humanity.
He seems like a beautiful soul.
He is a beautiful soul. And like I say, I still go to the ends of the earth for him. I love him. I care about him. He changed the world. How many people you can say did that?
You mentioned Devo a few times. You described Devo as wanting to put an alien head on an R&B body. What
Yes.
did that phrase mean to you in musical terms?
Well, just as a quick aside, the thing is this: the Devos love R&B. They grew up listening to R&B. So when I came on board, I made really sure that the bottom end of their records was really R&B. The band was a small band. It was not meant to have lots of overdubs. It was a simple band. Everyone played their part, one part each, right? When they played together, it was an ensemble, but it was more like a string quartet. It was tight and it was together, but it had an R&B bottom end. And I made very sure that that stuck, that the bottom end, the kick and the bass, were the R&B, had the R&B feel. And then they put the monster on the top, but it was an R&B body with an alien head. That's what Devo is.
Yeah. When you first heard it, do 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 do, bing, do, were you thinking
5 up, 2 down. Da 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 da. 5 notes. Bong bong. 2 notes down. Very simple, very easy to remember, very impulsive feel. Those guys are marvelous. Mark is a marvelous songwriter. Jerry knows how to really write the lyrics. Jerry is a real politician. And he just had a baby last year, or the year before. And
good for him?
He's pushing 70.
But they also had that genius in the idea of the image, the look.
Yeah, when you look at their
That's
live
the
show, you
whole-
can see when you look at their live show, you really realize how really tight and highly organized they are. They're absolute geniuses at this stuff. All we had to do is just not drip stuff all over them, sugar coating and syrup and bullshit, and just let them play their instruments and play out and maintain their impulsive energy. And by bringing them into the control room, I was able to do that and allow the crosstalk and the energy and everything else to really fulfill itself super loud and quad in the control room. That's what made them happen.
All right. What's the story of the whip crack?
Oh man. Howard Siegel, was my engineering partner for the project, who's actually Jack Black's half brother.
Really?
Yeah, we brought Jack into the studio when we were doing DEVO. Jack was like 10 years old, right?
Get
10 or 12
out.
years old.
Wow.
His little nose was over the console like this, right? And we played the DEVO album for him, and I think it changes. Well, those guys are still together. They're still friends to this day. But
Wow.
yeah, Howard and I were complete madmen together. And there's this long hallway going down from Studio A to Studio B on one side, and then the other side was the canteen and the jacuzzi and stuff and offices. This is like narrow hallway. It was very reverberant. We went out there at 7 or 8 in the morning when no one was around. And Howard put a condenser mic down at the U-87 down at the bottom of the hallway and one close. And everyone was trying to crack the whip. I tried it and I cracked the whip and stabbed myself in the face. My whole cheek was like that. And I think in the end, I think it was Jerry that finally got the whip crack. We recorded it. And then, of course, there was no digital anything. So we had to fly it in at the right place, spin it in with another machine. And then we put stuff on top of it and stuff. But it was tricky, but it was fun. And the story remains as a wonderful story. And those records are very earthy and very hands-on. There was no digital anything. And the variation in it is, again, what makes that stuff magical and compelling is the fact that the irregularity, it's the bird flying across the hedges. You watch the bird, you don't look at everything else. You just look at that one little 6-ounce little thing flapping from one end of the parking lot to the other. That's the way music is. You want that, you want the magic, you want the unpredictability, you want the irregularity. That's what makes great records happen, is that the magic of that.
Yeah, Devo stood out musically and visually, and it's great to see them get the respect musically, because I think in the beginning people were so caught up in that look, which was iconic, but there's a real artistry behind that music.
Well, the thing is this, it used to get the thing too. Oh, his record's about jerking off. That's
That's
what it is.
right. Yes.
Oh, but no, it was it was about Horatio Alger. No, it's about jerking off. You know, it was everything to everybody. Everyone was like trying to figure out what it was about, right? And it had that kind of a crossover. You couldn't really tell whether it was about sexual issues or was it the American dream about you can improve, you can do better. Horatio Alger, the whole concept of do good and be moral and be upstanding and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
You can whip it. You can whip it good. You were whipping it. I whipped it last night, you know.
I always looked at it like kind of get your ass in gear and make things happen. But like I say, you can read it as you wish. Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. There's so much more in this book, and it comes out May 19th, right? So there's still some time where people can, they can pre-order.
Yeah, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read portions of it. It's Book Soup, which is a bookstore out here on Sunset Boulevard. I'm going to pontificate with my book. You know.
Cool.
So it's all life in the fast lane, my friend. Live your life. Be honest. Be truthful. Always the first thing I learned when I got sober and put down all that stuff behind me. Tell the truth. That's what it's about. Tell the truth.
That's another part of the book that's inspirational too. You had some setbacks. You reinvented yourself. You've learned some lessons in a remarkable life. Robert Margouleff, thank you, sir. Is there a website people can go to? Where can people?
Robert.margouleff@gmail.com.
They can send you an email.
They can, and I'm happy to answer too.
Thank you, Robert.
God bless you.
That's it. It's in the books.